This is Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. You're listening to one of the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can find all the other shows at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, the high-functioning marksman, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear, where we counter the media's negative image of gun culture by introducing you to the amazing men and women who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. We're focusing on people, not politics. The everyday people from all walks of life, men and women who volunteer their time and effort, who spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. They're your doctors. They clean your teeth. They're fixing your houses, taking care of your pets. They fix your computers and pilot your planes, and they protect our streets and our nation. They are gun culture at its finest, and it's misunderstood or completely unknown to the mainstream media. Today, I'm going to introduce you to another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. As we've heard on this show from match directors across the country, match directors face many challenges in running local or sanctioned matches. The weather is the most unpredictable and potentially the most ruinous. Nothing sucks the fun out of a perfectly planned match like shooting in the pouring rain or the sweltering heat, scoring soggy targets under plastic bags, or squinting at failing tablets that have been exposed to the heat of the midday sun. Whatever the challenge that nature throws your way, our friends at Match Shark can help. Match Shark's patent-pending target shields keep your targets dry even in heavy rain. They allow you to run your matches more smoothly because setup and teardown is easy, pasting is easier, scoring is easier, and for the shooter, you can see the target more clearly because you don't have to cover them in plastic bags. And their new line of tablet shades help you keep your tablets cool and extend the life of their batteries when they're exposed to sunlight all day. They reduce eye strain too, which makes tablet use much easier for your safety officers and shooters. Designed and manufactured here in the USA, owned and operated by shooters with years of experience in setting up and running matches, let Match Shark help you run your matches faster, smarter, and better. Check them out today at matchshark.com. Get everything you need to be prepared for your next match, just in case Mother Nature decides to show up and spoil things. Match Shark target shields and tablet shades can make it a better experience for your safety officers and for your shooters. Go to matchshark.com today. Our special guest today is Jay Koller, formerly from Albuquerque, New Mexico, recently transplanted to the Phoenix area in Arizona. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lloyd. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a little about yourself. Tell us, what do you do for a living now that you're transplanted to the Phoenix area?
Well, I've been a live event producer and technical designer for corporate meetings and that sort of event for, about 20 years I've been doing this. And the best way to describe what I do is all the sound and lights and video you would see at a concert. I do all of that design and implementation for product launches and corporate meetings and, boring stuff. But we try to make it fun. And just recently, my company was utilizing a partner that we've had for the last 8 years in Arizona. And the guy who owned that company wanted to retire and approached me to see if I wanted to buy that business. And since we gave them a sizable chunk of our revenue each year, it kind of made sense. And it was a pretty easy decision to make. So I picked up my partner, Jamie, and we bought the business and moved out here.
Nice. Very good. So originally from New Mexico?
Yeah, I was born in Chicago. Raised in New Mexico. I lived about 10 years in Phoenix in the early 2000s and then moved back to New Mexico several years ago and apparently now back to Phoenix.
It was just meant to be, I guess. Where did the, being born in not exactly gun-friendly Chicago and then raised in a more gun-friendly state like New Mexico, where did the interest in guns, where was that sparked? Was that something from your parents, or was that something you picked up later on?
It's actually quite interesting. So my parents moved out of Chicago when I was just a baby. I think I was only 2 or 3 years old when they transplanted to New Mexico. And then when I got out of high school, I ended up in Phoenix to go to the Conservatory for Recording Arts and Sciences, which is a sort of a specialized trade school for the business that I'm in now. That's how I ended up down there. And then just being down in and around Phoenix and around people, I took an interest in concealed carry. And when I turned 21, I went down and said, I want to buy a handgun, and I wanted to buy a Glock at the time because it's the only thing that I knew. That's the only gun that I knew existed. And I walked into a local gun store in Phoenix, and the guy handed me, he's like, I know you want a Glock. He's like, but this is the newest thing here, and it's really, really inexpensive. And I tell you what, if you buy this and you hate it, if you bring it back, I'll give you full credit towards a Glock of your choice if you don't like this gun. And that gun at the time was called an HS-2000, which is now the Springfield XD.
Right.
And so that was my first foray into firearms. I took a concealed carry class and really didn't do much with it. I think I was your typical early gun owner that buys a gun as a magic talisman.
Right.
To keep me safe from all the bad guys, and never really had any knowledge whatsoever. And then came across a guy who sort of opened my eyes and let me realize how much I didn't know, kind of got interested in it. And in that process, actually found IDPA. And he said, this is a really, really great way to sort of supplement that training and to sort of, get into that mindset and actually use your gun. And once I started shooting off of a square range, there was really no going back. And strangely enough, my parents really had nothing to do with it. Also, when I was in Arizona, I found hunting. And weirdly enough, when I moved back to Arizona, somehow in that process, my dad found hunting also. So when I came back to New Mexico, we had something in common again to sort of bond over a little bit. So it wasn't by my parents instilling anything on me. It was just by happenstance and being in a good environment and being lucky enough to meet the right people who put me on a good path.
Interesting. So what was the interest in getting your concealed carry permit? Was that just because I'm 21 and I can, or was there something that sort of, for some people, there's an event that comes along and says, I probably need to think about, personal protection, or was it just, this is my right, I'm old enough to do it, I want to do this now?
It was a little bit of both. So I think probably a little bit more of the former of it's my right, and I think it's something that interests me. But I've always been pretty independent and pretty ready to get going. Even when I was in high school, I was on my way out the door before I even graduated, and had plans and things to do. I bought my first house when I was 18 years old, and as you could imagine, being 18 years old with a relatively meager income, it wasn't in the best neighborhood. So up until recently, now here we are 20 years later, and I'm finally moving into a nice neighborhood. So it was kind of a little bit of both. Just sort of seeing that, I think it is something that's important to exercise, and like I said, being blessed to have people around me who's like, it's not your idea to get into a bad situation.
Right.
That's something that I can't remember who it was that told me. I remember mentioning something like, well, I only carry my gun if I think I'm going to go to a place where I'm going to need it. And he looked me dead in the eye and said, why would you go to a place where you think you would need a gun? And that sort of stuck with me. And that was kind of like the turning point of like, yeah, I really don't know anything that I'm talking about, so maybe I should go figure it out.
Right. Exactly. Oh, very good. So what do you remember of the first? He introduced you to IDPA. What do you remember of that first IDPA match that you went to?
I think that's a really pertinent question, because I think it's something that new shooters, us as experienced shooters, should probably be very, very cognizant of for new shooters. So when I heard about IDPA, the first thing I wanted to do is I just wanted to go and watch. right? Because I didn't know what it was that I wanted. I didn't know what it was I was supposed to bring, what it was I was supposed to do. I didn't even know if I really knew how to handle a gun. So the people that kind of took me under their wing, they're like, no, bring your stuff. We'll take care of you. We'll make sure that you're safe. We'll make sure, that you have everything you need. And they did. And I ended up shooting that first match, and I think placing like dead last, if I remember. It's so long ago, it's hard to remember. But what I do always remember about that is how I felt. Like I was incredibly intimidated, and I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, and I really didn't know what to expect, because up until then, my experience with guns was gun magazines, because it was, kind of when the internet was budding.
Right.
TV shows and the square indoor range that was by my house.
Right.
And that is all I knew. So to introduce something where I'm moving around and drawing from a holster, which I've never done before, was incredibly, incredibly intimidating. And I try to think about that when I get new shooters into our club, or I see new shooters on the range. I try to make it a point to walk up to them, maybe not around other people, and be like, hey, do you have any questions? Or is there something that you're worried about? Maybe we could go over to this other bay and we'll work it out before you have to do it in front of everybody else. And just sort of to keep that in the back of my head of what it was like my first time, because I don't remember what club it was at. I don't remember what the match was like, but I remember how I felt.
So what did you do after that first experience being, the nervous new shooter? What did you do to overcome that? You're now a master in 3 divisions. What did it take to get past that initial sense of, I don't really know what I'm doing here and I'm really nervous about embarrassing myself, to actually getting up the nerve to go out and shoot a sanctioned match?
I think a lot of it had to do with the people, and it's one of the things that is the best part about IDPA, and at times can be the worst part about IDPA, depending on where you're at. The best part about IDPA is in shooting sports in general. It's one of the only sports I know where if I showed up to a match and I had a problem with my gear, the guy that I'm trying to beat, or the guy that's trying to beat me, is going to offer up his gear to make sure that I have everything I need to compete to my fullest, so he could beat me fair and square, which is probably one of the best things about it.
Yep.
And that kind of extends to new shooters as well. The people are going to offer up their gear. They're going to offer up their belts. They're going to offer up their extra mag pouches or magazines, or in some cases even guns if they don't have the right stuff that they need. And I think that's a great asset to shooting sports in general. And that's really what kind of put me over the edge and got me, for lack of a better term, addicted to it. I mean, I showed up there and I'm like, these are all good people. Like, all these people are good people, and they all want me to succeed, and they all want me to come back. So I do want to come back. And then just the sport in general, I think, like I said before, once you shoot in a dynamic environment like a shooting sport, it's really hard to go back to that square indoor range and plink shots at 7-10 yards.
What was your first sanction match? How long after that first experience before you decided to get out there with the guys in the NASCAR jerseys?
I believe my first sanctioned match was the New Mexico State match. I don't remember what year it was, but I do remember it was in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Okay.
And I remember going down there with my wife at the time, and it was really cool because she felt, really welcomed, and it was, kind of a fun little traveling weekend. And, I remember winning something off the prize table. It was a squash blossom necklace that a local artist made and donated to the prize table. And that's what I picked out. And everybody, of course, cheered because instead of, getting something cool and gunny, I got something for my wife who came down with me.
Smart move.
So that was my first sanction match. It's funny the things you remember, right? It's not like all of the no shoot that you hit or the hardcover or whatever. It's the kind of the stuff that happened after, the people you met.
Yep.
And I think that's really what keeps, to circle back to your question, that's really what keeps people interested in the sport, and that's what keeps new shooters coming back. And if you could foster that, I think that's really, really the key to having a successful club. And on the flip side, I think that's something that we got to be very careful of. People get siloed into their clubs. They get cliquish. They get their way of doing things, and I think that tends to isolate people. And then when new shooters try to break into that, especially if they're operating on some loose interpretation of the rule book, it gets very confusing for them. And it gets very hard for them to break into that. So that's the only thing I would think that, to caution other clubs about, or to keep going, is that sort of family feeling, to have that second family where you're showing up and your friends are there and there's people there to support you no matter what happens. I think it's a great thing.
How long were you shooting the Springfield, and if you've moved on, what are you shooting nowadays?
Oh wow, man. No one have moved on, so I shoot lots of things. I shot the Springfield probably in one match. And then I think, like any new shooter, I'm like, I want to be better at this. And obviously the first thing that I need to get better is a better gun.
Right.
So I went out and bought a SIG 229. I'm left-handed. So what I didn't know is that I can't really operate the SIG 229
right.
very well. But I love that gun, and I carried that gun for a long time. And then I moved on to 1911s, and I really started getting active into IDPA, shooting a Les Bear custom carry. That was my first real competition gun, and I've had that gun. I still shoot in CDP. I think that thing's just past 90,000 rounds.
Oh wow!
On that gun, it's on its second barrel, and it's gone back to gunsmiths. It has no finish on it, but it still works. It's my backup gun now when I shoot CDP, but I still quite often use it. Right now, this year, I've been kind of jumping around guns because I've been trying to get my Master Bumps, and as everybody who's shot IDPA for a long time knows, that you could shoot once you get to a certain point, you could shoot the classifier and become a master.
Mm-hmm.
But for me personally, I really wanted to get it by match bump, because that told me that I was like, I know I could go shoot the classifier and make my master classification, but I want to make master by competing with my peers and competing with the people that I respect, and get it that way. So
right.
Once I got my CDP Master Bump, I started shooting a Walter Q5 match, which is actually my partner's gun, but it's the only gun that we have in our safe that's stock. So I started shooting that, and I got my ESP bump with that. And a couple months ago at the Colorado Regional match, I got my Master Bump. And it was pretty serendipitous, because just this last weekend I was competing in the Colorado State match at the same range and got my first master win in SSP.
Nice. Those match bumps they're memorable when you get them, and I totally understand the idea of wanting to earn the match bump, the bump in a match and not in a classifier. Any of those bumps over the years stick out in your mind as being more special to you? Is any interesting stories from any of those matches?
Yeah, I think my first bump to master in CDP, the reason being is because I really didn't have any expectations. It was at the Gulf Coast Championship in Houston, and I was hot. I was miserable. I was shooting okay, but I wasn't shooting great. I was making a lot of little mistakes here and there, and I was just kind of shooting my match. And then when the scores come out, first place expert and enough for a match bump, and I was like, oh wow, holy cow! So I wasn't really. I wouldn't say I wasn't trying, because I was absolutely. I wanted to win. I think that's in everybody's personality in shooting sports, is they want to win, right?
Right.
So I wanted to win, but I wasn't. I didn't feel like my skill level was worthy of that win yet, because I knew the people I was shooting up against, and they were some of the best shooters that I knew. So I just kind of shot my match, and just by shooting my match and focusing on what I could control was enough for that bump. And it kind of gave me that sort of charge to, what, I really want to get good at this. And in the past year, I've gone from a middle of expert class shooter, B class in USPSA, to master A class in probably the last 9 months to a year. And I've made more progress in the last year than I have in the probably previous 7.
What would you attribute all the success to?
A couple things. One is putting the work in, and also is good training. I'm very, very blessed to have my good buddy Tim Herron, who is a USPSA Grandmaster, who's also kind of one of my sponsors. Gives me a lot of free training. And I shoot all the sports. I shoot IDPA, I shoot USPSA. As a matter of fact, Jamie and I my partner, we're heading out to Serbia on Friday to shoot the European Handgun Nationals in IPSC. So we kind of get all over the place, and having his training and showing me how to practice was very, very helpful. He didn't really show me or teach me anything new. He just showed me how to practice, how to focus on something. Like, what do you do when you go to the range? It's like, well, I do this and I will do this. He's like, well, try to focus on one or two things and just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping the biggest thing was keeping a log. So once I started keeping a log of what I was doing in dry fire and actually putting a plan together, when I put a plan together, that's when I really started seeing the progress. So it's like, okay, I'm going to dry fire at least 3 times a week. I'm going to shoot for 5 times a week, but I know that my life is crazy and it gets in the way. So I'm going to at least make sure I get 3 times a week in. And in that 3 times a week, at least one of those days, I'm going to practice on draws and reloads. Another one of those days, I'm going to practice on single hand manipulations. Another one of those days, I'm going to practice on movement and getting into position. And having that plan and a way to execute it and actually track that progress gave me the focus to know what I needed to work on. And so when I go to shoot matches and I notice a weak point, I could mentally kind of note that and alter my practice to address that weak point. And that is really when I started seeing the improvement.
Nice. Now, you talked a moment ago about that CDP Master Bump and how you shot your game, but you really didn't feel like, you were doing anything particularly special. You didn't think it was that as you were going through it, it didn't feel like, oh yeah, I'm on a roll. And then you get the match bump and it's a surprise, a pleasant surprise. Contrast that with how maybe some of the others felt. Were there other times when you just felt like, all right, I'm on it today and everything's going my way, everything's working?
Yeah, when I got my ESP bump at the New Mexico Scorcher this year, I was shooting with staff. I was working the match, and I just had it that day. It's just like every plan was executed, the way that I wanted it executed, and everything kind of fell into place. Gun worked great. Everything was good. I think that match was Ben loves no shoots at long distances, and I think I was the only person on the staff to not hit a no shoot.
Oh wow!
But again, I kind of reserved myself, and that's kind of funny. And I think it speaks to like the mental game, which I think is really important as well. Knowing that I was working the match, and everybody knows that when you work a match, you're not nearly as competitive as when you just shoot the match because your attentions are divided. You've got other stuff to deal with. You're dealing with, sussing out the stages and basically doing your job as a staff member. So I reserved myself to, I'm going to shoot a really good match. I'm going to work on the things I've been working on. And me in particular, like as I started getting faster, my fundamentals fell apart. So I really wanted to focus on trigger control and my grip. And that's all I really wanted to do was for the match and just feel like I had good trigger control and good grip, and sort of kind of threw it out of my mind that I had a potential of a match bump, and again just shot my match and it worked out in my favor. And it was funny. There's another woman out of Tucson here, Kimiko, who is just a beast and like just progressing so fast. And I saw her on the roster. I'm like, oh, there's no way I'm going to beat Kimiko. I just got to shoot. You know what I mean? Like, I think I edged her out by a couple of seconds. And that was kind of like the master bump was great, but I was like so focused on trying to compete with her that, like that to me was like a big win too. And I'm sure if she hears this, she's going to, kind of get a chuckle out of it.
What's the key to, I know, to sort of quote Yogi Berra, the game is, what is it, 90% of the game, or 50% of the game is 90% mental, or whatever. What was that line? Mm-hmm. What is it? I think, in my opinion, one of the biggest hurdles for new shooters particularly is learning the mental game. I know it was for me. It was, you can spend all the time you want in practice, but if the mental game's not there, it doesn't really matter how good your skills are. What does it take to develop that sort of that skill to formulate a game plan and put it into practice without fail?
I don't really have a good answer to that, to be honest with you. I mean, the mental game is still something that I struggle with. And I think it just comes with practice and time and having that real dedication to yourself of forcing yourself to focus, I think having a routine is helpful. When I go to a stage, I always look at it from every angle. And then I walk to the back of the stage where the targets are and I look back, to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And then I walk, back to the front of the stage. And when I'm doing, when I'm the on-deck shooter, I've got my little ritual, and it's less of a ritual for, ritual purposes, but more of a ritual just to make sure that I keep myself focused on what I need to do. And I do things in a very specific order in order to make sure that I have everything. And that sort of gets all of those extra thoughts out of my head because it allows me to focus. But I think really just that time of knowing what affects you and how it affects you and then making adjustments so it doesn't. I think the biggest thing that I struggle with is keeping a stage that goes wrong with me, right? Oh man, I did horrible on that stage, and then letting that stage follow you throughout the match, is like an awful thing. And I think my turning point for that was, I would see the match scores at the end, and I was like, oh, I was 5 seconds away from getting X position or 5 seconds away from getting the win, right? Oh, it was that one no shoot. If I wouldn't have just hit that no shoot and kind of beat myself up over it, it was like, oh, it's that one thing. And like, human nature, you look for an excuse, right? And it's like, well, I didn't win because I hit that no shoot. That was all on me, right? That was 100% me. And so once you kind of get into that mindset of everything you do on the range is 100% you, and then figure out a way to forgive yourself when you make those mistakes and move on, I think it's a little bit easier. And if you look at the scores I always try to analyze my scores after the match. I never analyze them or worry about the match when I'm shooting. I never worry about what I'm doing wrong when I'm shooting the match. I worry about it after the match so I can make those adjustments. I'll make little mental notes, but I won't focus on it because I don't want to have the last thing in my head when I'm shooting a new stage is don't hit that no shoot, because then I'm going to be looking at that no shoot and the chances of me hitting that no shoot are going to be really high.
Right.
So I try to worry about that stuff afterwards. And I think once you kind of get rid of that, and are able to just focus on the task on hand, it makes it a lot easier. And if you look at the scores for when I did get the bumps, I'm not actually at the top of all the stages. A lot of times I'll be fifth, fourth, third, fifth, fourth, third, but it's consistent all the way across. So I'm shooting a game and I'm shooting well under control and I'm shooting within my limits and what I know. I mean, I always want to push a little bit, but I don't want to push to the point where I fall off the rails. And I think that that's really, truly the difference in the true master shooters. I don't know if I don't really consider myself a true master shooter yet. I just feel like I'm lucky to be part of the club at this point. But if you look at them, they're very, 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 very consistent. Really, really, they have a stage fall off the rails, and I think that's the key. And once you figure out how to get your consistency, it's easier for the mental game to follow.
What's the biggest thing you think that you've learned that has changed your game?
I would say practice, learning how to practice. Finding somebody that could teach you how to practice, how to keep a logbook is very, very helpful. There's a couple great trainers out there and a lot of great people who will do online web stuff. Elias is one of those people who shoots IDPA and USPSA. He's an incredible, incredible teacher. I've taken one of his classes. He knows how to practice. He's really good with the mental game. I think that when I took his class, that was one of the big takeaways was how to prepare mentally out of that. Like I said before, Tim Herron is really, really great with teaching you how to practice and the why behind what you're doing. And there's just a ton of other people out there that do that. And I think that's really, really a good thing is to, even if you think you know what you're doing, having somebody else teach it is an incredible way to do it. When my partner started shooting, when Jamie started shooting, she was brand new. She hated guns. She didn't like guns. She didn't understand why people wanted guns. And then she went with the match and she was like, okay, this is okay. And then we went to a 3-gun match, a local 3-gun match. She saw a girl that she went to the gym with and she was like, oh, that I could go to the gym with that girl. And she started talking with her and she was like, no, I think I want to try this. And, she tried it and now she's gone in, not even 2 years in, she's a year and a half in and she's gone for a brand new shooter. She just broke into C class in USPSA. She just got her sharpshooter bump in ESP and SSP this year. So she's gone from a brand new shooter to a sharpshooter in a matter of a year and a half. And she was only in raw time at the Colorado State match. She was only an average of about 2 or 3 seconds behind me on every stage of raw time.
Wow.
The only place where she lost out was like points and stuff like that. So she has got master written on her, in a couple of years if she keeps with it. So, and I think when I started kind of showing her the ropes, it was an interesting thing that happened because I was like, wait, these are all things that I'm teaching you that I'm not doing. So just kind of having that other set of eyes to reinforce maybe what you already know or just take a different angle on it, I think is a terrific thing. And that's a great way to advance. I think getting some outside training is very, very helpful, especially from a lot of the great, national champions that we have that offer that training, but not better not to learn from. And then if you have the opportunity, get on the super squad.
Yes.
Still try to shoot your game. I think a lot of people make the mistake of getting on the super squad and then trying to go as fast as them, and they totally fall apart and have the worst match ever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could get on the super squad or get on the squad next to the super squad, so you can kind of take a peek over,
Right.
when they're shooting, I think that's a really good way too.
All right, so you are, as we said, you've progressed from that guy that was nervous at his first match in, what has it been now, 9 years, to master in 3 divisions with bumps at matches. You are working on, match bump to CCP and CCP by the end of the year, and growing in the sport. What is it about this sport that makes you keep trying? You said you shoot other disciplines as well. What keeps you coming back to IDPA? What is it that makes it fun for you? What is it you love about it?
So I see IDPA and USPSA as 2 completely different games. They have 2 completely different, in my opinion, they have 2 completely different disciplines. And shooting one makes me better at the other. When I shoot IDPA, I'm more focused on accuracy. IDPA is an accuracy game first. You could shoot very, very fast, get a bunch of 3 and 1 down, and you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really quickly. So shooting IDPA, where it's a more focused fundamental game, is very fun for me. And shooting USPSA really helps me with my movement, my stage planning, getting in and out of position, and they kind of feed off each other. So I've noticed that when I shoot IDPA, I'm much more accurate when I shoot USPSA. And then when I shoot USPSA, I'm much faster when I shoot IDPA. So they're 2 different skill sets, 2 different focuses, I guess you could say, of the same sport. And that's what I like. I love the people at IDPA. I think that's great. Just the camaraderie, being able to travel around the country and see people that I know. I love going to matches and seeing the Russos.
Yeah.
It's like, just to me, it's so flattering that they'll travel all the way down to Washington to New Mexico to shoot our matches.
Yep.
And it's just like I'm so grateful for them, to do that. They're coming down to shoot the Blue Line this November, which is like the week after Nationals, and they donated some money to help for the charities and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's that is what I really love about IDPA, those people.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to get a chance to chat with you a little bit, pick your brain, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Sheepdog at the end of the year. And best of luck to you at Worlds. And I look forward to seeing you in Valdosta in December.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.